OK, bon matin tout le monde. J'ouvre la réunion.
Hello, everybody.
Number 106 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights, pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2, and the motion adopted by the committee on March 21, 2024. The committee is continuing its study on anti-Semitism. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all members and other meeting participants in the room of the following important preventative measures. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, all in-person participants are reminded to keep their earpieces away from all microphones at all times. As indicated in the communiqué from the Speaker to all members on Monday, April 29, the following measures have been taken to help prevent audio feedback incidents. All earpieces have been replaced. Please only use the black approved earpiece. All unused earpieces will be unplugged and should be at the start of the meeting if you're not using them. When you're not using it, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so that we can conduct our business without interruption and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. Merci en avance and thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you in advance.
The meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Tous les tests de son
All of the sound tests have been done.
Not working, but all the sound tests have been completed. So I want to make just very few comments for the benefit of members and the witnesses. 1, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. 2, a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For the benefits of all attending and viewing the webcast, I remind that all briefs can be sent to the committee until May 27, 2024, and they should not exceed 3 pages in total. I now want to welcome our witnesses for the first session. As an individual, we have Mr. Mark Sandler, representing Secure Canada, Madame Cheryl Sapuria, Chief Executive Officer by video conference, representing Universities Canada in person, Mr. Gabriel Miller, President and Chief Executive Officer, representing by video conference the Toronto Police Chief, District Chief Robert Johnson, Deputy Chief, and Detective Sergeant Kiram Bisla, Acting Detective Sergeant. Each of the 4 will have up to 5 minutes of opening remarks, after which we will proceed with the rounds of questions. I will indicate by raising the card that there's only 30 minutes left. If you don't see it, I will probably end up needing to interrupt you when the time is up, and I will be fair with all witnesses alike and all members, of course. So thank you very much. And with that, we will commence, and I will ask Madame Gladue to please start with 6 minutes.
Witnesses are going to testify.
Oh, yes, of course. I've already skipped the witnesses. Aren't you lucky? Okay. So in order that I have them on my piece of paper, with 5 minutes, please, to Mr. Sandler.
Thank you. Good morning. On October the 7th, life completely changed for Canadian Jews, not simply because Israel had been the victim yet again of terrorist brutalities directed against helpless citizens, but because almost immediately and before a single Israeli soldier set foot in Gaza, on Canadian streets and campuses, faculty members and students, union leaders and known jihadists celebrated and glorified Hamas's barbarities. The murdered included Israeli-Canadian Vivian Silver, a well-respected peace activist involved, amongst other things, in ferrying children from Gaza to Israeli hospitals. What perversity of ideology, human behavior, and appalling ignorance explains the glorification and martyrdom of those who torture, behead, rape women, and burn Jews alive? And in Canada, or of those who brag about how many Jews they've slaughtered. Canadian Jews, I can tell you, are depressed, angry, frustrated, and puzzled by the normalization of hatred directed against them. Don't tell Canadian Jews that these are isolated instances of hate when large numbers of protesters march behind a banner that says, "by any means necessary," with a picture of a weapon being brandished. Don't tell Jews that there's a benign interpretation of "from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," language that mirrors that of a genocidal, Jew-hating, jihadist terrorist organization, especially when just 2 days ago, a large march on Toronto's streets included not only the responsive chanting of that phrase, but also "the only solution is Intifada revolution." We don't want two states. Bring us back to 1948. And the chanting of Sinwar's name, Hamas's leading war criminal. Don't tell Jews this isn't about anti-Semitism or that it's only about protected speech. When students and radicalized faculty say all Zionists are evil, all Zionists are racist, all Zionists are genocidal, the vast majority of Jews are Zionist and many of us pro-Palestinian. I believe, without a trace of humility perhaps, that I've done more as an advocate to advance the rights of Palestinians than any of the people who are protesting in the way that I've described. Don't tell Jews that their children are safe in their schools and universities. Read, for example, the shocking brief of Ottawa against anti-Semitism. In public school, teachers erasing Israel from the map and replacing it with Palestine. Students giving presentations praising Hitler's leadership, saying he only failed because he didn't finish the job. A student at a graduation ceremony changing the indigenous land acknowledgement by blaming Jews for killing all her people. The principal didn't feel this was problematic. Students playing Choke the Jew, being threatened with a knife, shoved to the muddy floor of a yellow school bus and told to taste what their grandparents tasted in the Holocaust, and told by their teachers to just let it go. Don't tell Jewish women that they are safe on campuses. Read the equally shocking brief of the Canadian Women Against Anti-Semitism, who experienced the worst forms of misogynistic Jew hatred. Zionist hooer, fucking child abuser for having Zionist babies, rich Jewish bitch, you ought to be raped. These are our TMU students. Don't tell Canadian Jews that these are isolated instances. The data shows the opposite. I'm speaking to you in my personal capacity as someone who has combated anti-Semitism and other forms of hate, including anti-Black, anti-LGBTQ, anti-Indigenous, and indeed anti-Muslim hate for almost 40 years. However, I also invited over 40 groups, organizations, and individuals who are deeply concerned about anti-Semitism to come together in an alliance combating campus anti-Semitism to share their experience and expertise and recommendations with you. And they all responded. You'll read Indigenous, Muslim, Catholic perspectives, teachers, students at all levels, doctors, lawyers, faculty, academics, a media monitor, community NGOs, extremism experts, and those who are working with me on a national respectful dialogue on campuses between Muslim and Jews. And I'll conclude the oral comments by saying I've identified for you, trying to draw together everything you've heard, 10 reasons why overt anti-Semitism is so pervasive in Canada. I hope those will be of assistance to you, as well as 14 concrete recommendations to address that anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler, and we'll get back to your recommendations.
Thank you.
Madame Sapiria, please, by video conference, you have up to 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Cheryl Sapiria, and I am the CEO of Secure Canada, a nonprofit organization originally founded by Canadian victims of terror. Our mission is to combat terrorism, extremism, and related threats to Canada's national security and democracy by creating innovative and transformative laws, policies, and alliances. We are also a member of the informal coalition called the Alliance Against Campus Anti-Semitism in Canada. Secure Canada is not a Jewish organization, and anti-Semitism is not referenced in our mandate. But it has become increasingly clear that anti-Semitism is evolving into a national and global security threat, thereby placing this issue squarely within our mandate. Anti-Semitism is a key entry point for radicalizing, joining extremist groups, and mobilizing to violence. Anti-Semitism underpins ideologically motivated violent extremism across the spectrum, from neo-Nazi and white nationalist extremism to far-left extremism to Islamist extremism. The Jewish population may not always be the target, but anti-Semitism is used to leverage people's vulnerabilities and grievances and to bind a wide array of conspiratorial thinking. There are different factors that can make someone more vulnerable to becoming an extremist. Sometimes there are mental health considerations, or they may be socially disconnected, or maybe they have experienced some past domestic trauma. Then they start intersecting with the hateful ideology online, where they read that their lives are so unhappy because of the Jews. Here come the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and an us versus them narrative. And they read it enough times in enough different places, and they think, Jewish people have taken over. I need to be part of a movement that is going to fight back. For disenchanted young adults in particular, this is a template that makes their problems make sense. It has now been more than 7 months since the October 7th attacks by Hamas, and there are some new radicalization trends emerging in Ontario. First, younger kids are getting radicalized, as young as 12 and 13. Second, the extremist ideologies are fusing together, so you are now seeing Islamists who also love Hitler. And third, there is a new breed of extremist that hates 5 things: Jews, women, democracy, police, and transgendered people. We are living in a globalized world, so it is hard to isolate homegrown Canadian variables from foreign variables that are inflaming today's anti-Semitism. But it is worth exploring both elements. A current notable area of research is the foreign funding of North American universities. An organization called ISGAP has found that a massive influx of foreign donations to American colleges, much of it from authoritarian regimes, supports heightened levels of intolerance towards Jews, open inquiry, and free expression. One of Secure Canada's board members is the renowned UK-based counter-extremism expert named Haris Rafiq. Mr. Rafiq notes that Qatar has spent up to $1 trillion to spread soft power influence and Islamist indoctrination, which at its very core is anti-Semitic and the bedrock of the ideology of terrorist entities such as Hamas, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda. Russia and China, meanwhile, appear to be manipulating public opinion by promoting anti-Islam.
Madame la Présidente, un point d'ordre.
Point of order, Madam Chair, we can't hear the witness. Yes, we can't hear her either, Mr. Fortin. Just one moment, please.
Okay, parfait. Madame Superior, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And
I stopped the
back, and I'm
clock when you froze. You've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Can you just let me know what you last heard in case I wasn't fully heard? Okay.
Foreign
I'll just keep
funding
going
for
from-
universities in the States. Madame Gladue, merci beaucoup.
Okay, so that was quite a while ago. Gosh, okay.
Madam Chair, I might be able to
Did
help.
you?
She had something said about Islamism being at the heart of anti-Semitism. That was the last note that I have on my paper.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Russia and China, meanwhile, appear to be manipulating public opinion by promoting anti-Israel messaging online. Whether foreign funded or not, North American universities must find a way to start dismantling the pervasive and destructive academic paradigm in which Jews and Israelis are portrayed as today's ultimate embodiment of evil: white, rich, privileged, racist, colonizing oppressors. There are also homegrown dimensions to Canada's anti-Semitism and extremism problem. It is worth researching whether a minimization of Canadian national identity and values, coupled with a high usage of identity politics, renders young people, both on and off university campuses, more vulnerable to charismatic recruiters looking to radicalize and recruit new members for their extremism cause. Put another way, a strong Canadian identity, based in part on respect for liberal democratic values and a clear rejection of intolerant authoritarian values, may help to create the resilience that is needed to inoculate against radicalization. The government, through CRA, must take a robust stand against charities and nonprofits that promote extremism or that have connections to terrorist groups. It is confounding that a group like Samidoun is a registered nonprofit in Canada rather than a listed terrorist group. The IRGC may not have charitable status here, but the government's refusal to designate them as a terrorist group while members of the Iranian regime continue to be found in Canada creates a culture of impunity. Speaking of impunity, a new group called Lawyers for Secure Immigration points out the absence of enforcement
So,
activity.
Madame Superior,
against
thank you. We'll come back to you during questioning. Thank you very much. We will now continue with Mr. Miller, please, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members of the committee. Je m'appelle Gabriel Miller et je suis le président.
My name is Gabriel Miller, and I am the CEO of Universities Canada. We are the federal and international voice of Canadian universities.
Study, and even more importantly, I want to thank the Jewish students and scholars who have bravely shared their painful stories. I'm sorry for what you've endured. We hear you, and we take this very seriously. Universities Canada unequivocally condemns anti-Semitism and all forms of racism and discrimination. Hateful, anti-Semitic acts have no place on our campuses or in our communities. They must be stopped. Learning on a supportive campus, free from harassment, intimidation, or fear for one's safety is critical for students and for the integrity of our institutions. The academic environment should foster freedom of expression, and with that comes the freedom to confront opinions or statements we may find misguided or offensive. However, students must feel secure attending university, to learn, and to participate fully in campus life. As a national organization at Universities Canada, we've been acting recently in 4 main areas. 1, working with public safety and the RCMP to help ensure the physical safety of students, staff, and faculty. 2, preventing hate and anti-Semitic acts through campus codes of conduct, which should, by definition, help protect Jewish students. 3, sharing best practices and lessons among institutions and the community. 4, working with 27 universities to detail the specific actions they are taking to fight anti-Semitism in response to a December 13th request from MPs. Universities Canada is working closely with Deborah Lyons, the Department of Public Safety, the RCMP, local MPs, and community-led organizations such as the Network of Engaged Canadian Academics, the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, and B'nai B'rith Canada. We are also in close contact with our international counterparts like Universities UK and the American Council on Education. We are listening carefully to Jewish students and scholars and to leaders in the fight against anti-Semitism. We welcome the practical, concrete solutions that have been presented to this committee. Proposals to ensure equal application of codes of conduct, EDI policies that fight anti-Semitism and protect Jewish students, faculty, and staff, new education and training programs, more extensive data collection and reporting, and broadening the use of the non-binding IRA definition as a valuable tool to help universities identify and address anti-Semitism. We are committed to working with you, with governments, and Jewish partners to address these recommendations. We know from police reports and annual audits that incidents of anti-Semitism have been steadily rising in Canada. And as many who have appeared before the committee have rightly pointed out, if anti-Semitism is not stopped wherever it's found, it spreads, it grows. We cannot forget the lessons of history when it comes to how unchecked hateful language too easily progresses to more hateful actions. These problems do not stop at the edge of campus. Anti-Semitism affects our whole society and demands a national, whole-of-government response. It is not a partisan issue either. And I hope members will continue to approach this study and the resulting report with a multi-partisan approach. Les universités ont la responsabilité particulière.
Universities have a particular responsibility to be a model of dialogue and respectful conduct. This responsibility not only extends to our students, our personnel, and our professors, but also to leaders in the Canadian community as a whole. It is our duty to do everything we can to stop and avoid anti-Semitism, just as it behooves all elected officials and directors to do the same thing.
Answering your questions.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Alors, on commence.
Thank you very much. So we'll begin the first round.
Dear Lord. It took me 12 to 13 hours to come from Halifax this morning, so here we go. Now with our last presenter, I will ask Chief Johnson to please use 5 minutes however he wishes with his colleague. Thank you.
So I think Detective Sergeant Karen Bisla will start, and we had a little bit longer than 5 minutes. I will wrap up with the 4 recommendations. Karen, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, sir. It's truly a privilege to speak before you today and share with you information relating to the service's hate crime unit, its mandate, how the service investigates and responds to hate crime, the significant 47% increase in hate crime reporting in 2023, and the extensive community outreach education efforts made by the service in an effort to address and combat hate crimes. It is important to note that not all police services have a dedicated hate crime unit, and how police respond to hate-motivated crimes differs from service to service. The hate crime unit was established in 1993 and is responsible for collecting statistical data and ensuring the thorough investigation of hate crime offenses within the City of Toronto. Since its inception, the hate crime unit has been embedded with the security section of intelligence services. This placement is by design, as hate crimes can be precursors to violent extremism in the forms of criminal extremism and terrorism, 2 areas of investigation falling under the security section mandate. This enables mutually supportive actions in circumstances where investigations of hate crime and violent extremism overlap. The investigation of hate crimes is a Toronto Police Service priority. Hate crime laws are complex because determining motivation of bias, prejudice, or hate can be difficult, and context is key. An essential part of the hate crime unit's mandate is to provide internal training to its member and assist in the development of public education programs in partnership with other members of the service and the community. In 2023-2024, the hate crime unit delivered training to new recruits, dispatchers, auxiliary officers, and members of the public safety unit who are especially trained to respond at public protests and demonstrations. These efforts help to ensure that police officers and community members are able to recognize hate crimes and work collaboratively to ensure that these crimes do not go unreported. The reporting of hate crimes is essential because it helps to identify trends and patterns across the city, which then informs service-wide strategies such as hate crime prevention, community outreach, and public education. Other aspects of the hate crime unit mandate include conducting investigations, assisting and providing expertise to all hate crime and hate propaganda investigations and prosecutions, providing follow-up and assistance in regards to all hate-related incidents to victims of hate crime in the affected communities, attending demonstrations and gathering evidence and investigating any suspected hate crimes or hate speech or signage. As you may be aware, a very high threshold must be met to lay hate propaganda charges, which require the consent of the Attorney General of Ontario. The hate crime unit liaises regularly with the Ministry of the Attorney General's specialized hate crime working group in relation to hate crime investigations and seeks AG consent in relation to hate propaganda charges as required. The hate crime unit also facilitates the exchange of information through its internal networks and with various law enforcement agencies at the provincial, national, and international levels. This includes co-hosting weekly meetings with the province's hate crime and extremism investigative team, a continued partnership with the RCMP and the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and taking part in national and international summits, including last year's Eradicate Hate Global Summit in Pittsburgh, to share ideas and build working relationships between subject matter experts and various government agencies, community leaders, academics, and law enforcement members. The hate crime unit is also responsible for reviewing, classifying, recording all reported hate-motivated occurrences. The classification of hate crimes is based on the criteria set in the Criminal Code and guidelines set by the Canadian Centre of Justice and Community Safety Statistics. This coming Friday, the service will be presenting its 2023 annual hate crime statistical report to the Toronto Police Service Board. With the exception of 2022, the number of reported hate crimes has been steadily increasing since 2018. There are multiple factors that can affect the fluctuation in the number of reported hate crimes in the different community groups that are victimized, including geopolitical events, heightened awareness stemming from community educational programs, hate crime training, and increased media coverage. In 2023, the service experienced a 47% increase in reported hate crimes compared to 2022, from 248 to 365. Over the past 10 years, between 2012 and 2022, the average number of reported hate crimes has been approximately 174 per year. The ongoing Middle East conflict that escalated after the events of October 7, 2023 is a significant contributing factor to the increase in reporting. In 2023, the increases in reported hate crime in the following victimized categories were as follow. Anti-Semitic occurrences increased from 65 in 2022 to 135 occurrences in 2023. Anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab occurrences increased from 12 in 2022 to 36 in 2023. Anti-2S LGBTQ+ reported hate crimes increased from 40 in 2022 to 65 occurrences in 2023. There was a 32% increase in the number of reported hate crimes after October 7th during the months of October, November, and December in 2023 compared to the same time period in 2022. Mischief to property offenses were the highest reported.
Detective Bisla will come back to you. So thank you for the opening remarks.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
I think they believe that they had more time. If I can get unanimous consent on the committee to hear the 4 recommendations.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Thank you. The number of arrests related to hate crimes in 2023 increased from 46 persons in 2022 to 59 persons.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Please hold on.
I think
Madam.
the consensus was just to hear the 4 recommendations. Am I correct?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. The 4 recommendations, please.
Okay. So the first one is obviously in the purview of the province, given that they're responsible for policing. The 3 might be appropriate within this forum. So the first one is the creation of dedicated hate crime units, mandating a hate crime course for investigators and culturally sensitive training, which will provide service members with the foundational knowledge about the practice of religions such as Judaism and Islam, as well as enhanced understanding of the community impact of hate crimes, and will ensure a consistent investigative approach. The second one is adopting a standardized definition of hate crime and conducting community consultations to better understand the definition, and controversial slogans is recommended. We know that in speaking with community and our officers that there is a sense of frustration around the lack of clarity as to what constitutes a hate incident as opposed to a hate crime or hate propaganda. A commitment to ongoing education and training for our officers will assist the public and the police in this regard. The third one is AG consent to be removed as a prerequisite for laying hate crime charges. The rationale is to unleash the power of the common law to evolve the rules around acceptable speech and conduct. Also, banning certain flags or symbols should be considered. And the fourth one is the list of banned organizations as they fund terror and hate should be updated, as many new groups have surfaced since October 7th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On commence maintenant avec nos premiers tours.
We'll start with the first round with 6 minutes for each member. Ms. Gladue.
Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here to discuss this very, very serious and important topic. In my role as the critic for civil liberties, I'm hearing from across the country concerns that the rule of law is not being enforced equally, especially when we consider anti-Semitic incidents that are happening. So I want to start with the Toronto Police Services, and I'm just going to go through a number of the incidents that have gone on so that you can give us a picture of what's really happening there. Starting with, at Christmas time in the Eaton Centre, there was a pro-Palestinian demonstration where death threats were made to the police and shoppers were intimidated and harassed. Were there any arrests made as a result of that?
Yes, there were.
Very good. Then there was the Avenue Road blocking of the ramp where hundreds of people were gathered, and the media had reported that Tim Hortons coffees were brought to the protesters. But the question is, I mean, it's illegal to block roads. How many of those hundreds of protesters were arrested then?
We did arrest a number of protesters. The exact number I don't have. Kieran, maybe you have it there. And there were subsequent conditions that were placed on those individuals, and as a result of the continued protests, we change our response and footprint around that bridge. Karen, do you have any of the statistical information on that?
I believe the numbers were 6. I would have to confirm that, though.
No, that's great. And any of these things you can send to the clerk afterwards if you don't have the information right with you. How many arrests for hate crime have been made since October 7th of 2023?
Karen?
Yes, I do have those numbers in front of me. And those are, I have 59 in total, and I can certainly provide a number of arrests that were made after October 7th.
One of the concerns I hear is that, especially in incidents like the Mount Sinai blocking of University Avenue in front of the hospital, that it's very difficult for the police with the resources that they have to deal with the situation. Have there been any requests made for supplementary resources either from the province or from the federal government? And if so, what was that response?
So I can tell you, we do work with our partners. All the GTA services has helped us with policing personnel to police the protests that are both spontaneous and planned. The province as well has been very receptive to providing resources through the Ontario Provincial Police. So we have had help from our neighboring police organizations.
Okay, and my other question is, we've seen a lot of intimidation, vandalism of small businesses, and also incidents happening on university campuses. Are the Toronto Police able to take action when crimes are committed on university campuses or in front of small businesses?
Yes, if it's a criminal offense, we do take action and investigate those occurrences. With respect to the University of Toronto, we are working with the administration and the campus security, campus police there. When reports of criminal activity occur and they take an occurrence, if they send it to us, we will engage in the investigation, as well as if individual members who might have been the victim of a crime on university campus come to us directly, we do take that report and investigate it.
Excellent. I think it's critically important, your role in making sure that people do know that the rule of law will be enforced and that, violence and intimidation, harassment, these things will just not be tolerated. I want to turn to Ms. Sapiria from Secure Canada. You were talking about the concern about foreign actors being involved in some of the activities of the protests. Do we have evidence in Canada of foreign actors that are influencing these pro-Palestinian demonstrations at Canadian universities?
That is a very good question, and it's a very salient one right now. There's a lot of research being done to understand where the funding is coming, because there is a wide acceptance that the protests from the beginning were much too organized and much too well funded to be these organic, spontaneous, local demonstrations. So that is something that hopefully in the coming weeks and months we will have a great deal of research on.
Very good. And I noted that you mentioned some of the extremist groups and the IRGC that need to be added to the list of designated terrorists in Canada, and I think the police services recommendation contained that as well. So I would ask if both of you could submit that through the clerk, the lists of those organizations that you believe should be added in order to protect. That would be great. Now I'm going to turn to Mr. Miller and talk about the universities in Canada. It seems to me that all of them have codes of conduct, and that students can be censored. So the question is, are they enforcing their codes of conduct, or are the protests that happen on campuses actually not students but other actors?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the question. To start, I think it's important to say that what we've been hearing in our conversations with Jewish students and leaders in the past several weeks is how important it is that these codes of conduct be enforced in a way that's equal to all groups and provides protection to all groups, including, of course, members of our Jewish community. And that's the message that's being delivered by the community to our university leaders. Universities are using all of their policies, including codes of conduct, to ensure that the proper standards are upheld. But of course, there is a lot of work to do. We've seen examples, I think, where clearly we're letting our Jewish students and faculty down, and that there's a great deal of work to do to improve our performance.
We will continue with Mr. Mendocino for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you to the witnesses for attending this morning. This committee has heard disturbing evidence from Jewish Canadians from just about every generation going back to the post-Second World War period. Their testimony is clear and consistent. Jews are being targeted at every turn. Students, professors, professionals, business owners, public servants, union members, faith leaders, families. Just last weekend, the shooting at Bias Haya Jewish Day School for Girls in North York, in my hometown of Toronto. Another horrifying incident to add to the record levels of anti-Semitic violence against Jews, as documented by B'nai B'rith. Imagine having to send your daughter off to school this morning knowing that there are people who want to attack her. And all you want to do is assure her that she's going to be safe. But how can Jews feel safe when laws aren't enforced? When encampments go on for weeks without consequence? Or like in the case of Adil Sharkoui in Montreal, who explicitly demonized Zionists and incited violence, there are no charges. Jews can't feel safe. They don't feel safe. And the consequences are real. More unlawful protests, more violence, more Jew hatred. This study has to be a call to action for all Canadians to put on our gear, pick up a hose, and extinguish the 5-alarm fire that is anti-Semitism in this country. This morning, I want to focus on a written submission from Canadian Women Against Anti-Semitism. This is a grassroots organization in Toronto. Their written deputation explains in vivid detail the impacts of anti-Semitism on Jewish women. And they make 2 key points. First, that the word Zionists has been misappropriated and perverted as a racist trope against Jews. And second, that sexual violence against women and girls is explicitly being coupled with Jewish hatred. We see this specifically on university encampments where there are repeated denials of the raping and torturing of women by Hamas, along with chants like "Long live October 7th," glorifying terrorism and, by extension, the violence done to women on that day. The deputation even makes reference to a 6-year-old girl, who was told that she should be raped by Hitler, and that all Jews should die. Mr. Sandler, you're an expert in the criminal law, but you don't have to be an expert to conclude that these are prima facie examples of hate speech. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely correct.
And that any student on any campus alleged to have uttered such hate speech warrants at a minimum an investigation by universities under their respective codes of conduct. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
To your knowledge, has any student been the subject of a disciplinary investigation warranting their expulsion to date?
I'm unaware of very much activity on this front at all, frankly.
My question next is for...
And I'm aware of many instances where no action's been taken.
Indeed, so am I, and we've heard it from Jewish students themselves. My question next is for Mr. Miller. On behalf of Universities Canada, can you inform members of this committee whether or not any disciplinary proceedings have been commenced on the grounds that students have committed some of the hate speech that we've heard directly from Jewish students themselves?
Well, I want to start just by echoing your message, which is that the kind of language and behavior that you're describing is absolutely intolerable, offensive, and needs to be eradicated, and we need to work much, much harder
the
to protect
expression of solidarity. My question is whether or not any disciplinary proceedings have been commenced thus far.
I'd be happy to follow up with the committee with specific examples. I know that universities are working with their codes of conduct, and what they've heard from Jewish students and faculty is these codes of conduct need to be applied more equally so that they protect all members of the community, and there's certainly more work to do there.
Mr. Sandler, I see you would like to come back.
Well, I don't want to ignore the fact that we have radicalized professors and faculty and would not simply focus on students. And there's jurisprudence that makes it clear that even in the absence of proof of a hate crime, that we are able to deal with, in a disciplinary matter, with faculty who are creating a poisoned environment in their classrooms.
Wholeheartedly agree, and we heard from Dr. Rosenberg just last week, who was previously a teacher at the University of British Columbia Faculty of Medicine, who resigned despite the fact that he had raised repeatedly his concerns around that kind of toxic indoctrination, which we're seeing not only on his campus, but right across the country. And so in addition to that, Mr. Sandler, you've also got experience, as I said, in the criminal justice system. There are many tools that are available to law enforcement. We've heard from Toronto Police Service this morning that as part of an action plan, we need to see more training of police, prosecutors, and members of the judiciary. Do you agree with that, and can you expand?
Not only do I agree with that, but what I am seeing is inconsistent application of the law right across the country. I'm seeing underutilization of various sections of the criminal code that do exist and which I have identified. I've also seen the absence of designated prosecutors to deal with these crimes, so that you're actually having internal disagreement within Crown Services about what is prosecutable and what is not. So we need a national approach that understands anti-Semitism, understands the criminal law tools that are available to deal with it, and applies it across the country.
I've got less than 10 seconds. Is it concerning to you that when individuals who have an interest in seeing these encampments taken down bring applications before the courts for injunctions are being denied?
Response at the next question. Alors, merci beaucoup. Alors, on recommence maintenant.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Fortin for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here this morning. This is an important topic that is concerning for all of us, and your help will be vital in finding solutions. I have a question for Chief Johnson and Detective Sergeant Bisley. You talked about 4 recommendations. I like this approach that aims to help and to fix problems. Now, some of the things were obvious, like training, for example, but you also talked about the definition of hate crime. And it's something that concerns me. Maybe one of you could share with us if you have a suggestion for a definition that might be clear. I imagine that you've already thought about this. Mr. Johnson?
I'll start, and then maybe Kieran can jump in. I think the issue is, twofold. It's one, internally with police organizations and police officers, and then more importantly with community, because of misinformation, lack of information. I think this is a complicated issue, and in my recommendation, I mentioned the importance of consultation with community, because I think this is a bit of a moving target, and maybe addressed through some regulation, so it can be easily or more easy to change, as things evolve. Kieran, would you like to speak to specifics?
Hi, yes. I know there's discussions in Toronto Police Service as part of those discussions with respect to creating a standardized definition that all police services can refer to. It's not standardized at this point, but as part of our work with the RCMP and the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, we are working together with police services to ensure that we have a standard definition. At this time, the definition of a hate crime is a criminal offense committed against a person or property, motivated in whole or in part by the offender's real or perceived bias, prejudice, or hate. And the key is the intentional selection of the victim based on their identifiable group.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Bisla. In your opinion, should all types of hate be treated equally, or should there be a special attention put on anti-Semitism or other types of hate? Is there specific treatment that should be applied to specific types of hate, or do you think all types of hate should be treated or managed the same way?
Well, the law addresses hate in a number of ways in the criminal code. There are specific provisions that speak to anti-Semitism specifically under the hate propaganda legislation.
Sorry, Ms. Bisla, I understand my time is running out. I don't want to be rude. I understand that there are definitions in the criminal code, but maybe I can be a little more specific in my question. In the criminal code, there's a provision. It's 319 that says that nobody can be found guilty of anti-Semitism if the statement was made in good faith, it's an opinion on a religious topic or on a religious text, or that they're using arguments. So my question is, in your opinion, is this type of exception where it says you can express hate if it's based on a religious text, is this an exception that we should maintain, or should we review that?
There are defenses available in the criminal code. I am familiar with those defenses, and they are considered, and it's always done on a case-by-case basis. So if you're asking me, do I think those need to be revisited? I think they're appropriate. I think that might be a question that might be better suited for a lawyer as opposed to myself.
My colleague, Mr. Mendicino, just raised situations such as Mr. Sharkawi this winter or last fall, I can't remember exactly when, publicly called on Allah. I can't remember exactly what he said, but the equivalent was what he was saying was that all Jews should die. And so the question was, could Mr. Sharkawi have been found guilty even with the exception in the criminal code? I understand you don't have a specific opinion, but does that type of provision allow for this kind of hate speech? Did you hear? Are you waiting for the interpretation, Ms. Bisla? It's a question to you.
Thank you very much. There is a provision in the criminal code that prohibits advocating genocide. In terms of my opinion regarding a specific situation, I would have to look at all the facts of a case because these are based on context. So I'm not in a position to comment about just a general statement.
Monsieur Johnson, peut-être en quelques secondes.
Mr. Johnson, in a few seconds.
Back to that, Chief. Thank you very much.
Madame la Présidente, point d'ordre.
A point of order, Madam Chair. There's a lot of time that is lost because of the interpretation, and that's fine with me. But if we want to be fair, perhaps we could add 30 seconds to my 6 minutes just to allow for that, because I'm waiting for answers that could be answered immediately if I'd ask the question in English. So I appeal to your sense of justice, Madam Chair. Yes, I am very fair indeed. Yes, I know you are. But now we're going to start with Mr. Garrison.
Madam Chair, I want to start by thanking all the witnesses for being with us on this study. I do believe it's one of the most important things we've embarked on. And in particular, I want to thank Mr. Sandler for being very forthright in placing the situation Canadian Jews face before this committee in a forceful manner. And I know that one of the things you didn't get to was discussion about the 10 reasons why anti-Semitism is so pervasive, because I think it's important we understand where it's coming from if we're going to make recommendations on how to combat it. So I'd like to give you as much time of my time as you need to talk about that.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. So I've identified the following factors, and I'm happy to elaborate on them as might be necessary. We see the active involvement of extremists and extremist organizations in Canada, which are operating with impunity here. We see foreign money infused into Canada, and we've seen one expert describe Canada as a major hub for extremist financing and money laundering worldwide. We see the misuse of social media by circulating misinformation, anti-Semitic tropes, and historical distortions, and this misuse is orchestrated in many instances by extremists and foreign governments. We see radicalized faculty members who seek to indoctrinate students rather than engage in a discussion where controversial topics are discussed. We see in many classrooms a culture that does not promote respectful dialogue on controversial issues and that does not encourage critical thinking and active listening. We see the confusion and often deliberate obfuscation of the distinction between protected speech and hate speech designed to immunize those who engage in hate speech or hate activities from accountability. We see the underuse and inconsistent use by law enforcement and prosecution services of existing criminal law tools. And I might say that from my perspective, the issue is less about defining a hate crime, and it's more about training through case scenarios so that police officers actually understand what you do in a specific case situation. And I've worked with the Toronto Police on case scenarios pre-October 7th, and I think it's of critical importance, especially now. The failure by many school administrations to enforce their own codes of conduct to protect students from harm. The use of slogans that incite violence, promote hatred, and mirror unequivocal jihadist language and activities. And finally, mainstream media stories. And I don't bash the media generally, but what I see here is the mainstream media stories that often minimize or ignore pro-Israel perspectives, subject Hamas's assertions to a lower level of scrutiny than Israeli assertions, treat unsupported assertions of fact, and repeatedly fail to correct or give appropriate attention to the disproof or undermining of inflammatory assertions about Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. I want to ask Mr. Miller, how, I guess frequent, I guess is the right word, how frequently do codes of conducts at the university specifically mention anti-Semitism, and how frequently is anti-Semitism a part of diversity initiatives?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. These are 2 points that have been raised with us in all of our discussions with Jewish students and leaders. On the first point, we helped collect answers to a question, a letter from MPs to 27 universities that asked this very question. All respondents, I believe Mr. Housefather might correct me, but said that their existing policies would prohibit anti-Semitism. But what we're hearing from students and faculty is that it's the enforcement of those codes of conduct in an equal way where they see institutions falling down. And there's work to do there. And I think better training, picking up on some of Mr. Sandler's point, and better tools for identifying and addressing anti-Semitism will help very much. On EDI, there's work to do here, and quite a bit of work to make sure that EDI frameworks and policies and administrators are protecting all students, and specifically Jewish students and faculty. We have seen examples where changes have already been made, and a commitment from all of our universities to continue making changes to reflect the fact that there's now, I think, a growing realization that these policies need to do more to protect Jewish Canadians.
Without maybe reinterpreting what you've just said to me, what I hear is that you haven't said anything about whether policies explicitly mention anti-Semitism and specifically protect Jewish students as part of diversity. You haven't really answered that. You've said that universities say their policies would prohibit anti-Semitic acts, but do they specifically address it? Because I think that's a problem with enforcement. If something is not explicitly addressed, then it creates a vacuum.
Well, let me be clear. I think that those policies, and we will be working with our members to make sure that we are explicitly not just documenting that needs to be the case in policy, but communicating it so that Jewish students and faculty know these systems are there for them and that they can access them to protect themselves and feel secure in their campus.
Mr. Sandler, would you like to add to that briefly?
Yes, there are codes of conduct that don't address this issue adequately or at all. And I wanted to make a point is if one doesn't adopt the INRA definition of anti-Semitism, then codes of conduct that prohibit anti-Semitism are worthless because it's defined away. And people will describe it as not anti-Semitic and therefore define it out of existence.
Very much. We will now go to our second round, notre deuxième tour, with
our second round.
To Mr. Van Popta, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us here today on this very important study on anti-Semitism. Detective Sergeant Bisla, my first question will be for you. You said that the Toronto Police Service takes anti-Semitism very seriously, and I know that you do. and you said that that in your opinion, hate speech is a precursor to ideologically motivated violent extremism. So in your opinion, what's happening on University of Toronto campus today, is that a precursor to what you would think is ideologically motivated violent extremism?
When I'm talking about those types of examples, I'm talking more in respect to mischief, some of the mischief investigations that the Toronto Police Service has been involved with, flyers being posted and displayed in various areas within Toronto. I'm not speaking specifically to University of Toronto.
Good, thank you. Now, I read in the Globe and Mail this morning that the University of Toronto is seeking an injunction in order to remove the encampment on the university grounds. Are you aware of that? And perhaps you could give us a bit of background.
I am aware of it, but perhaps the deputy might be able to speak a bit further on this.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, we are aware of it. We have been working with the University of Toronto for the last couple of weeks on this issue. And we got notified this morning that they are seeking an injunction.
Good, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Mr. Miller from Universities Canada. You had said in your opening testimony, and Mr. Sandler has also referred to it, the importance of a code of conduct and adopting the era definition of what is anti-Semitism. Now, is that a universally accepted statement across all your universities? And I asked that question in the context of something I read in the New York Times, where authorities at Columbia University are saying it is not our job to define anti-Semitism, it is our job to listen to students. So in that context, or what are your comments?
First, it's very clear that being able to define anti-Semitism is critical to being able to identify and address it. And we've heard very clearly from Jewish leaders and students and faculty that our universities need to have the tools to clearly define and identify anti-Semitism so we can be more effective in addressing it. The question around IRA is one of the most important topics that's been discussed by this group. And there are two things that I think are very encouraging in this area. One is the work by Deborah Lyons, the special envoy, who is working on resources to address questions about how to use IRA, because there are some important questions that we have to answer so that we can bring everyone along in the use of this very valuable tool. And the second, I would say, is the work of the Network of Engaged Canadian Academics, who appeared before this committee and have made very clear and done very, very good work in demonstrating the value of that tool, underlying the fact that it is non-binding and that it can be very useful to institutions in academia and outside of academia in fighting anti-Semitism.
Okay, so why is the IRA definition important as opposed to some of the other competing definitions which maybe don't tie anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism?
I would imagine Mr. Sandler. Yeah. Let's let Mr. Sandler.
Mr. Sandler, then.
So the reason it is of critical importance is this: that anti-Semitism is a cancer, and it metastasizes in different ways through eras. So what are we dealing with now? We are dealing with anti-Semitism in the form of anti-Zionism. This started. I won't give the whole history lesson, but there's a well-documented history of Zionism as racism, started in Russia and propagandized. And we've been fighting that for years because it involves a distortion of Zionism. Zionism is nothing more or less than the right of Jews to have a homeland. It has nothing more to say about that other than our right of self-determination. And it's not inconsistent with Palestinian self-determinism, for example, in a two-state solution. Now, the reason I'm sorry I went on too long, but if I can just then answer your question, and that is that if that definition is not utilized and we exclude anti-Zionism as part of the anti-Semitic picture, then we're not addressing the current form of anti-Semitism that's prevailing on campuses and schools.
So over to you, Madame de Brussen, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I thank all the witnesses. I have to say, one of the challenges I'm facing today, and I'll start with you, Mr. Miller, is that there's a gap between what the students told us at the press conference, what the students told us here in their testimony, and what you're saying, which are very nice words, like they're very reassuring words, but there seems to be a disconnect between what they're experiencing and what you're saying on behalf of universities. And so maybe if I can start with this point. The special envoy, Deborah Lyons, when she came to speak here, said, I'm going to quote her, "We have not had our brains shrunken neither by COVID nor by social media. We are capable of holding two thoughts in our brain. It is possible to be pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian at the same time. Canadians have that capacity." As universities, you are there to help foster respectful dialogue, disagreement. What are the universities doing to actually broach that problem, which is right now what we're hearing is it's not respectful on campuses?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I appreciate the question. There's no question that there's a huge amount of work here to do. And I do want to address your point about any kind of gap between what you're hearing from me and what students have said, because that's certainly unintentional. My message to the students who've appeared here is we hear you, and we understand that the experiences you've had are very real, and that we have a lot of work to do to address this situation and improve things. And universities are committed to doing that work. Every day on university campuses, people engage in constructive, respectful dialogue around very difficult issues. But we are seeing some very important examples of us falling short.
I don't have much time, but what we're hearing is that it's not respectful, right? And that people can have very strongly held positions and disagree. But the expression of it, I would think universities, their main role should be in helping model how do we have these conversations. So,
Yes. I agree. We have a special and particular responsibility in our society to be a place where respectful, open dialogue occurs. And I think picking up on some of what Mr. Sandler said, perhaps in a different context, is we're seeing universities' ability to do that challenged, and we need to up our game. We need to educate ourselves and do a better job of modeling that in a new world where anti-Semitism has morphed into new forms.
Thank you. Just quickly, as a question, anti-Semitism isn't new. We've been hearing that. And the history of anti-Semitism at universities isn't new. And in fact, in our next panel, we will have several universities sitting here who had quotas on the number of Jewish people who could attend certain programs or be in their universities. Do you have an inventory of which universities had that systemic anti-Semitism baked into their policies? And is that not something that needs to be addressed as a going forward piece?
It's an excellent suggestion. What we have is a very good picture of the general situation that existed in Canada. And I think your point is one that I think has been under-discussed, which is this country was saturated in anti-Semitism right up until the 1960s. And one of the contributions that universities had to make first was confronting their own anti-Semitism, which was deep and severe, but also opening the doors to scholars like Irving Abella, who helped document that anti-Semitism and its causes. And that's a huge part of the contribution our institutions need to make going forward.
I don't have much time, so I am going to ask that you talked about sharing best practices and conversations with universities in the UK and US. If you can submit to us what those best practices might be, that would be helpful. Mr. Sandler, I'm really not giving you much time, but I know that you did put in a letter trying to foster that respectful dialogue. Can you just tell us a bit about that work and how we can do better?
Sure. So this was built upon an initiative that was started by the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law,
30 seconds.
Muslim and Jewish law associations. So So I built on that, and we've created a national respectful dialogue initiative that 2,500 members of the legal community have signed up on. And the idea is now we're operationalizing that, so we will have respectful dialogues on our campuses.
7 seconds.
Can you please then submit, I know that you said you were having future conversations as part of that respectful dialogue thing. Can you please submit anything that you're doing so that we can also provide it to the university?
Monsieur Fortin, pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Fortin, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Miller, I have a question for you, Mr. Miller. Of course, we can understand the intent here to fight anti-Semitism. Hate speech is unacceptable in Canada. Now, we also know that there are values that are important, for example, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, and these values can come face to face in this type of discussion. How do you see finding a balance between freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, and fighting hate speech in public? Mr. Miller.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It's very important.
Would make on this is that we often talk about academic freedom and freedom of expression as being in balance with the need for respect and for preventing discrimination. But I think it's also important to see how much these complement each other. The message we've been hearing talking to Jewish students and scholars is that one of the consequences of not equally applying codes of conduct and other policies is it deprives them of their academic freedom and their proper freedom of expression. And that's when a university and our society begins to really experience difficulties because it's premised on all people having those freedoms.
Merci. Monsieur Sandler, pour quelques...
Thank you. Mr. Sandler, for 20 seconds on the same question, please.
So I've provided you an article that I wrote on the distinction between protected speech and hate speech. But I want to say simply, there are clear demarcations between the two. And the example that I usually give is that if someone wants to criticize Israel's policies, its practices, the conduct of its government, and so on and so forth, that's contemplated by the IHRA definition as not being anti-Semitic. And a democracy should welcome that. And I can tell you as a member of the Jewish community, I've been sharply critical of the Israeli government where it's appropriate. The difference is when one says, all Zionists are racist, all Zionists are evil, Israel should be wiped off the map. That transcends protected speech, and now we're in the realm of hate speech.
Merci, Mr. Sandler.
For the final 2.5 minutes, please, to Mr. Garrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had some different ideas about where I was going to go this morning, but I want to go back to Mr. Sandler. What we see is stepping away from the narrow university context, a failure to prosecute hate crimes generally when it comes to anti-Semitic hate crimes. And I wonder whether you would speculate, maybe, is not the right word, but about why we see that failure. Is there a fault in the law, or is it something more pervasive than a fault in the law where we don't see prosecutions that we might see if another group were involved?
Well, it's a great question, and thank you for it. So for me, there's a multifactored answer to it. The first is that I think that people genuinely don't understand anti-Semitism. And I think with the lack of understanding of anti-Semitism comes a lack of understanding of where the boundaries have been crossed and a criminal offense has been committed. So for me, it's back to the training and education that we've talked about. It's back to having dedicated prosecutors who are dealing with these issues every day. And it's back to having a national strategy so that people actually understand what this is all about. Part of it, unfortunately, is latent anti-Semitism. And I'm not suggesting that decisions not to prosecute I would lightly attribute to someone being anti-Semitic. Because I think ignorance is the bigger problem here when it comes to prosecutions and police. but that definitely does exist. And the third thing that I think is of critical importance is that freedom of speech is now being weaponized and deliberately distorted in a way that inhibits prosecution. So for example, when I say here that the celebration of barbarity by Hamas is not protected speech, when I say here that by any means necessary is not protected speech, then I will be accused of Islamophobia. And I will be accused of propagating hatred, completely misunderstanding or distorting where those boundaries are. And as I said, I've worked with members of the Muslim community. I've been involved in Muslim-Jewish dialogue, but that distortion is contributing to the inhibition to prosecute the legitimate cases.
Thank you very much to our witnesses. As the chair, I've got one quick question to the police. You talked in your recommendation about hate crime, the Online Harms Act that's been introduced, Bill C-63, attempts to enshrine the definition of hatred in the criminal code. I'd like to know if you support that or if you have any recommendation on it. And before you answer that, I will say to all our witnesses, please submit anything in writing that you feel that you did not get a chance to get out here this morning. So just maybe 30 seconds to the police on specifically on the hate crime definition.
So I've just recently reviewed Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, and I do support it.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now say thank you for coming this morning. We will now deal with the second panel. I've just been informed by the clerk that we are expecting votes. I will ask when the time comes for unanimous consent to continue with the second panel until time to vote, and then you folks can think about that and let me know if you are willing to give consent. So with that, I will suspend for 1 minute to ensure the next witnesses are ready. I now want to welcome our witnesses for the second panel. Please take your seats, members. We have witnesses by video conference and witnesses in the room in person. Again, I remind you to please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking, and that all comments to be addressed through the chair, and we will have 5 minutes each. We have 4 witnesses for the second panel. We will start with Dr. Graham Kerr, President and Vice Chancellor of Concordia University, for the first 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Concordia University. Concordia has 50,000 students and staff, and our downtown campus is on 2 of the busiest streets in Montreal. Nous accueillons des étudiantes et étudiants.
We welcome students from every corner of the globe. This diversity is an asset for us. We are proud of our Jewish community, which has shaped Concordia's identity and achievements throughout its history. We are also proud of our Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim communities. They too contribute to Concordia's character and its many achievements.
Attacks by Hamas on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza have exposed divisions in Canadian society, which are also reflected at Concordia. Many members of our community have suffered profound anguish, trauma, and loss. In circumstances like these, our first responsibility is to show empathy and support for all. But given the level of fear and anger the conflict is causing, empathy and compassion can only accomplish so much. I don't pretend to have perfect answers or actions to share with you. Everyone is struggling with the polarized environment and complexity of the challenges we face. What I can say categorically is that there's no place for hate at Concordia. We're all disgusted by the rise of anti-Semitism, the spread of Islamophobia, and the proliferation of identity-based hatred and violence. Canadian universities embody academic freedom, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly. They should be places of civil, evidence-informed reflection and debate. They also need to be places where people, above all our students, feel safe, where everyone can participate in campus life without fear of intimidation and harassment. Sadly, the lived experience of some members of our community has been tarnished by real and perceived acts of contempt, intolerance, and hate. A stark example occurred on November the 8th when there was an altercation between students as well as external individuals in one of our buildings downtown. Campus safety personnel tried to defuse the situation but ultimately had to call the police. 2 individuals were arrested, disciplinary processes followed, and continued even now. That incident gave Concordia a black eye. It raised legitimate questions about how we both uphold our values and ensure a safe environment for everyone. Depuis, nous avons adapté et élargi notre...
Since then, we have adapted and widened our approach to dialogue and conflict resolution. We regularly collaborate with student groups. We met our union leaders. We refused or canceled certain events that we felt could likely generate a climate of intimidation. These events were planned by both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli organizations. And on several occasions, I addressed the community directly. Each time, I insisted on our collective role in finding solutions.
Has to every situation been perfect? No. But our actions have been rooted in careful consideration and an attempt to balance the different rights at play. Following the November incident, and our community has largely responded in kind. Following the November incident, both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian groups regularly held information tables and events throughout the remainder of the academic year. On one occasion in January, those tables were next to each other. Were we nervous about that event? Yes, but we had all learned from the bad experience in November. The mood was civil. There were no incidents. However, in March, there was a disgraceful attack by a small number of individuals on the Hillel Club. Campus safety intervened quickly, but it was another painful event for our community. I share these examples, both positive and negative, to be transparent. Yes, tensions exist at Concordia, but there has also been a remarkable calm. This does not mean all is well. That's why our commitment to combating anti-Semitism and all forms of hate is ongoing. In April, we launched a task force against racism and identity-based violence involving faculty, staff, students, and alumni. Our goal is to develop actionable recommendations to improve policies, training, and complaint processes. At Concordia, we will continue to make every effort to ensure everyone can participate fully, openly, and yes, proudly
Dr.
in our
Carr,
campus
thank you
life.
very much, and we'll come back to you in the questioning. We will now go to Professor Deep Saini, McGill University President and Vice Chancellor, for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee.
this committee for taking on this important study. As we have been experiencing and have heard from your recent hearings, anti-Semitism is real. It is happening across our country, and we all have a role to play in confronting it. Le conflit au Moyen-Orient a
The conflict in the Middle East has led to intense debate on our campuses. We are committed to allowing free expression and peaceful demonstration, which are democratic rights.
tolerate behaviors that violate university policies or the law. The safety and well-being of McGill students, staff, and faculty remain our top priority. Si les manifestations relèvent
If protesting falls under freedom of expression, then it is our responsibility to make sure that it does not go beyond those limits. It must respect the law and the university's policies. And therefore, as soon as the situation on our campus started worsening, we acted.
line following McGill's operating procedures to de-escalate matters and request police intervention whenever the de-escalation was unsuccessful. Nous n'hésiterons jamais à prendre les mesures nécessaires.
We will never hesitate to take the necessary measures to maintain an environment where everybody's rights are respected.
Our campus community feel welcomed and supported at McGill is unwavering. Il est inacceptable.
It is unacceptable for our colleagues and our students to have felt intimidated because of events happening on campuses throughout the country.
Over the years, McGill has been working in close partnership with Jewish students, staff, faculty, alumni, and external community members to put in place measures to promote inclusion, and provide avenues and resources to support the community. Less than 2 years ago, we developed McGill's initiative against Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. This was done through meaningful consultations with McGill's Jewish and Muslim communities over several months. This resulted in 21 action items, all of which are either fully implemented or are in the process of being implemented. The aim is to help address, prevent, and raise awareness on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We created a Jewish Student Affairs Liaison, providing the Jewish community at McGill with a direct channel to the university's senior administration to request support, report incidents, or provide resources. Nous avons mis en place des
We established specialized support services for Jewish students. We also held workshops for managers in order for them to be able to support their colleagues, their students, and hold respectful dialogue in an inclusive workplace and learning environment.
While our EDI policies are established in accordance with the laws of Quebec and Canada, we are actively reviewing our internal mechanisms to provide avenues and support for our students and colleagues, including members of the Jewish and other targeted communities that face harassment and intimidation. Just a few months ago, we launched a new reporting portal to ensure any member of McGill community can anonymously and safely report incidents of harassment, intimidation, and doxing. Now, the protesters setting up encampments and interfering with university activities is a new challenge. It is unacceptable to intimidate staff, students, or faculty. Freedom of expression must be exercised with respect. In this regard, we've seen behaviors that have repeatedly crossed the line and breached our policies. That's why we followed our internal protocols and to address the matter. And we also engaged legal counsel to pursue court-ordered injunctions, and we have requested police interventions and assistance. Nous continuerons à faire tout ce qui...
We will continue to do everything we must to ensure the well-being of our students, our staff, and our professors. It is essential that the Jewish community feels safe and included on our campuses.
Again, thanking the committee for initiating this important dialogue. I would be very pleased to take your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous.
Thank you very much. We'll continue with the University of BC.
Antoine Bacon, please.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. The issue of anti-Semitism is so important, and this discussion is timely. I began my term as president of UBC on November 1st, 2023, 3 weeks after the tragic and horrific events of October 7th. My first message to the university community 5 days later was on the conflict in Israel, and we've remained vigilant and engaged since. Today, I state unequivocally that anti-Semitism is completely unacceptable at UBC and anywhere, and I will speak to our commitments and actions in support of this. I also refer you to my letter of January 19, 2024 to MPs, House Fathers, and others in response to the legitimate questions they raised about anti-Semitism at universities. We're facing difficult, distressing times around the world. We see individuals and communities deeply affected by the war and violence in Israel and Gaza. UBC is part of a global society with a diverse community of almost 90,000 people. Every global event affects some members of our community, and they evoke trauma, loss, and a wide range of complex emotion. I'm grateful that the overwhelming majority of our community, no, not everyone, sadly, have remained respectful and compassionate towards one another as the conflict has unfolded. Universities are also places of debate, sometimes protests, often sparked by global events, and recently UBC students began to take part in the broader movement that started in the United States and is now spread to Canada and all around the world. It's a very challenging situation. UBC supports freedom of expression and demonstration, the right to demonstrate. However, we do not condone behaviors that affect the safety, the security of our university community, or threaten or interfere with our operations. We're doing all we can. It's extremely challenging. It's a truly difficult situation. But let me assure everyone that anti-Semitism and any form of harassment and discrimination have no place at UBC. We have a responsibility and a shared obligation to create a learning and working environment where divergent and conflicting viewpoints can peacefully coexist. This is our mission. There are a number of policies and measures that UBC has put in place to support and strengthen a safe and respectful environment. First and foremost, UBC's discrimination policy, which governs our approach to discrimination on the basis of religion, race, place of origin, and is implemented in a manner consistent with how UBC's courts and Human Rights Tribunal implement BC's Human Rights Code. The university reviews all reported incidents of discrimination. Complaints of criminal hate speech can be directed to the RCMP for criminal investigation and potential prosecution. The UBC Student Code of Conduct sets out the standards that are expected of students and holds individuals and groups responsible for the consequences of their actions. Where a breach of these codes occurs, there's a range of potential disciplinary outcomes. Over the past year, we've also enhanced campus security, and we conduct ongoing risk assessments and situational reports to make sure we take appropriate measures to keep everyone in our community safe. Over the months, I've met with Jewish students, faculty members, community members, as has my senior administration, to understand their concerns and consider how the university can best address them. We've engaged over that time with Hillel BC, who are on campus, the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, the Special Envoy on Preserving Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Anti-Semitism, the Jewish Faculty Network, the Jewish Medical Association of BC, and the Jewish Academic Alliance of BC. We also work closely with UBC student organization to emphasize that our shared mission must include the protection of space for respectful debate and compassionate dialogue. It's not easy. UBC also provides community members with a range of supports, including academic and workplace accommodations, emergency funds, safety planning, professional support services, including counseling. The university also works very closely with Hillel BC and with individual Jewish students to address concerns that are raised through initiatives to improve the experience of Jewish students on campus. And this, of course, includes responding to reported incidents of anti-Semitism. We've also increased efforts to disseminate resources for faculty, staff on fostering respect, inclusion, safety, and critical constructive dialogue in the classroom and in the workplace. Everybody, this is a challenging time globally, and we fully recognize the concerns around anti-Semitism that the committee is studying. It was important for me to be here. Anti-Semitism has a long and terrible history, and we must always remain vigilant. Again, anti-Semitism has no place at UBC. It's our collective responsibility to do better and to find solutions. Merci beaucoup. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Merci à vous. Thank you very much. We will now go to University of Toronto. President Professor Merrick Gartrell, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to meet with you and your committee. I apologize for not being there in person, but I am required to be in Toronto today. Given the focus of your deliberations, my remarks will outline what the University of Toronto is doing to combat anti-Semitism. However, I realize there are other matters currently unfolding on the U of T campus that may be of interest to you, and I'm happy to discuss those in the question period. It is painful but necessary to recognize that anti-Semitism has been a scourge in our society for generations, if not centuries. It's particularly painful for me, as president of the University of Toronto, to acknowledge our role in this sorry history. Even more discouraging, then, is the fact that anti-Semitic incidents and hate-based crimes are on the rise in Canada, and that anti-Semitism has been a growing presence recently in our university. In recognition of this, the University of Toronto has taken a comprehensive set of actions to combat anti-Semitism and ensure our campuses are places where Jewish members of our community feel safe, included, and respected. This work is rooted in our long-standing opposition to all forms of racism and discrimination, but we have intensified our efforts since October 7th. Let me describe several of the actions we've taken. In 2020, we convened an anti-Semitism working group consisting of colleagues with specialized expertise to examine the challenge of anti-Semitism. We accepted all recommendations from the working group's report. The university's Equity Office has broadened its mandate explicitly to recognize anti-Semitism as a form of discrimination requiring concerted action. We require all equity staff at the university to undergo anti-Semitism training. We're working to improve the process of reporting hate-related incidents, enhancing clarity, accountability, and timeliness of response when such incidents are reported. We've appointed our first ever Assistant Director for Faith and Anti-Racism to strengthen our ability to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. She has a mandate to improve our processes for responding to such incidents, to foster dialogue, mutual understanding and respect, and to advance other measures to combat anti-Semitism. Our Chief Legal Officer is helping leaders across the university to understand the ambit and limits to freedom of speech. The identification of hate speech is set forth in Canadian jurisprudence, and our collective obligations under university and government statutes, regulations, codes, and policies. In addition, in 2022, the Temerty Faculty of Medicine and leaders of our affiliated hospitals apologized for their practice of imposing quotas for Jewish medical students and hospital trainees from the 1940s to the 1960s, sponsoring a research project that sheds light on this shameful historical practice. The Faculty of Medicine introduced a new unit on anti-Semitism and anti-racism as part of its professional training, and now consults regularly with Jewish learners to ensure they are properly supported. Since October 7th, my senior team has met multiple times with Jewish faculty, staff, and students to hear their concerns, direct them to helpful resources, and seek their advice on how we can better support them. We ensure that student organizations operate in an open, accessible, and democratic manner. Our policy has been put to the test and has proven effective in holding student organizations to account. In January, we announced a new lab for the study of global anti-Semitism at the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies. Its inaugural director is Ron Levy, distinguished professor at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. We also announced a new university-wide initiative to promote civil discourse on our campuses, led by Provostial Advisor Randy Boyagoda. Our efforts to combat anti-Semitism are comprehensive and multifaceted. Are they enough? Until there are no further instances of anti-Semitism, the answer for us and for society at large must be no. But I hope you will acknowledge the diligent efforts the University of Toronto has made to address this scourge and to atone for its role in the past, while acknowledging the work that remains to be done. Ultimately, we believe that the most effective way to respond to this challenge is to focus on our core mission of education and research. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I am noticing that the bells have started, and it looks like there's 28 minutes left for the vote. Can I ask for unanimous consent to continue for 15 minutes? Give 10 minutes for people to go to the vote? Okay. We will start with the first 6 minutes with the MP Landsman, please.
Thank you, and thanks for joining us at committee today. Throughout all of your statements, you have said things like, the university is no place for hate. There's a zero tolerance. It's unacceptable. It has absolutely become a place for hate, and you can see that in the testimony from students, from faculty, and from anybody who has dealt with the administration. It has absolutely become a tolerant place for that hate, and has absolutely become acceptable on campuses and in the front courtyards. Now, I'll start with President Gertler. It's nice to see you in this environment. Have you gone to the encampment?
I have, and it's right outside my window, so I see it frequently.
Yes, and so have you verified that all of the people there protesting, and I have a reason for this question, that all of the people there are protesting are part of the university community, are either students, are faculty, are part of the administration?
We know that many of our students are there. We know that they are visited by faculty, but we also believe that there are people from outside the university community who are present in the encampment at various different times.
So the reason I bring this up is because U of T is about over 60,000 students. There's, let's say, 300 people at those encampments. Do you feel that the university is now negotiating with less than 0.5% of potential students, or not even students, who are frankly holding the university hostage on its decisions on how it goes about its businesses? What do you say to those watching, in their faculty, alumni, parents who are deciding where their kids might want to go to school? What do you say to those people who see 300 people holding the university to account for a student body of 60,000?
Actually, our student body is closer to 97,000.
Oh.
So yes, it's grown a little bit since your time on our campus. I should say through the chair that we have been meeting with student representatives in our discussions about how to end the encampment peacefully. And they claim to represent all of the interests within the encampment. At this point, we must take that statement at face value. I can assure you, though, and I have gone public as recently as late last week with a set of proposals that the university has been putting across the table to the students, where we have not compromised on the issues that are clearly of importance to us. We have a very clearly articulated policy for considering divestment proposals, which we have used in the past, and we are saying to the protest group, the policy is there, it lays out the steps, and you're free to use it. And we hope that they will, because that is the only way that we can actually address this.
I think the point is that you are actually even engaging in a negotiation with the 300 people who have, illegally set up camp on the front lawn. But I'll go to, do you believe that the university is adequately enforcing its code of conduct? Because I'll show you what's at the front of the encampment. That's a symbol that glorifies terrorism by Hamas, and I think you've probably seen this in the past. You've probably seen it in various places around campus. But that sits at the front of the encampment. Now, don't you think that the university's code of conduct would suggest that something like that is against the code of conduct?
Well, Madam Chair, in responding to the member's question, first of all, we have asked the student organizers of the encampment to remove signage and language which is offensive, and they have complied on occasion, not in every instance. In other instances, we have reported hateful acts and hateful speech to Toronto Police Services, and you heard from the Deputy Chief in the previous hour. Something like 38 incidents have been reported as of the end of last week, a half a dozen of which we believe may qualify as hate speech or hateful acts. And we are working closely with TPS to help them indeed investigate these incidents. And as you heard from the police chief or deputy chief, they are indeed taking these allegations very seriously.
President Gertler, has there been any students that were suspended or expelled for any of these actions?
We have indeed had violations of our code of conduct, which have resulted in suspension and on occasion expulsion. And indeed, those have been related to, some of these have been related to recent actions and the protests around the conflict in the Middle East. So the answer is yes.
So is it related to the encampment specifically? When were these people suspended or expelled?
So the encampment has been in place for 3.5 weeks, and so we have not yet had
has
any.
Been expelled or suspended because of the encampment.
Those processes are underway. So
but
none have been expelled.
Nobody has been suspended or expelled despite having graphics like this. They've just been asked to take them down.
Actions are underway, but it does take some time to follow due process so that whatever conclusions are reached and whatever sanctions are recommended have indeed proper purchase. So that is our goal.
Okay, thank you. Just for the interest of members as well as witnesses, I will go for 6 minutes to Mr. Housefather, 6 minutes per Monsieur Fortin. We will then break. We have resources to come back after the vote, but I will need both the witnesses as well as members to agree to that, and we can come back till 5 minutes before 1:50, 1:55. So I will now go 6 minutes, Mr. Housefather.
Thank you very much.
About it, and I'll need a response.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for being here today. I cannot believe that in my lifetime we were having university presidents testifying before the parliamentary committee about anti-Semitism on campus. And President Carr, respectfully, I don't believe empathy should be the #1 goal. It should be protecting our kids and keeping our campuses safe of intimidation and harassment. That should be the #1 goal here. So I have some yes and no questions. I'd just like to ask everybody to say yes or no. If you can't answer yes or no, say I can't answer, but no more than that, or I'll reclaim my time. I'm going to start with President Saini, then President Gertler, then President Bacon, then President Carr. Do you acknowledge anti-Semitism is a significant problem on your campus, President Saini?
Yes.
President Gertler?
Yes.
President Bacon?
Everywhere.
President Carr? Yes. Do you believe that DEI programs, all DEI programs on your campus must include the Jewish community, must include Jews? President Saini?
Yes.
President Gertler?
Yes.
President Bacon?
Indeed, yes.
President Carr? Yes. Do you support the IRA definition of anti-Semitism? It's the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance that's been adopted by the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, the Government of Quebec, governments of a number of provinces. And will you support its application on your campus when the handbook from Ms. Lyons comes out on implementation of IRA? President Saini.
If this comes forward, I will have my support for starting the process.
Thank you, President Saini. President Gertler?
Our working group looked at this issue and concluded that the IHRA definition was problematic for application in the
So your answer is no, then? Your answer is no.
My answer is that the individual, Kenneth Stern, who authored the definition, was very clear in noting that it is not appropriate for use in a university environment. So the answer is no.
The answer is no. So I was just asking for an answer, yes or no, or I can't answer. President Bacon.
My understanding is this is one of the tools we consider when going forward on any cases of anti-Semitism.
You'll consider it going forward. President Carr?
Yes, we'll consider it going forward. In fact, my team has already had a meeting with Ms. Lyons' team.
Thank you. In 2016, the Canadian House of Commons adopted a motion by 229 to 51 rejecting the BDS movement, which promotes the demonization and delegitimization of the State of Israel, and called on the government to condemn any and all attempts by Canadian organizations, groups, and individuals to promote BDS. Does your administration oppose BDS on your campus? President Saini.
I personally find many of the demands of this movement offensive, and should the matter come up again in front of our governing bodies, we will consider it.
Thank you. Consider saying no or consider it?
We will, because this is subject to our governance processes, just like the Parliament has its governance processes. And as President, it's my role to uphold our processes.
I understand, but as personally, are you against BDS?
As I said, I find it very offensive.
Thank you very much. President Gertler, personally, are you against BDS?
We've rejected it consistently across the university and for many, many years, as we have all academic boycotts.
Thank you very much. President Bacon?
Yes, UBC has long rejected.
So the motion before your Senate, the UBC administration will come out against it?
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent. President Carr?
Yes, the university's position since 2014 has been in opposition to BDS.
Thank you very much. When you have chants at these encampments that say, go back to Poland, say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here, Intifada revolution, from the river to the sea, do you consider these chants to be hateful and anti-Semitic, President Saini?
The way I hear them used right now on our campuses, including at McGill, I find it anti-Semitic.
Thank you, President Saini. Thank you for clarifying in your statements that you do. President Gertler?
In the current context, they are certainly experienced as anti-Semitic, and that's for that reason that we have reported certain incidents to Toronto Police Services. But I would say that...
I'm sorry, I have to reclaim my time because I just have two more to answer. President Bacon? President Bacon?
No worries. They are unfortunate, awful, and can be considered anti-Semitic.
Thank you so much. President Carr?
Yes, they're reprehensible and intimidating when chanted on campuses.
Thank you very much. President Carr, I want to ask you a question about your STRIVE task force that you referred to in your testimony. One of the three co-chairs that you appointed to this task force has a long record of supporting BDS and opposing IRA, which leaves a lack of confidence amongst many of your Jewish students in the process. Why did you appoint this person, and will you consider removing them as a co-chair?
So, Mr. Housefather, one of the things that I find very unfortunate in terms of the public discussion that has happened since October is there's been a very intense personalization of issues. And we've seen that in terms of individual students being targeted, individual faculty members being targeted, et cetera. And I think that's extremely unfortunate.
The question is on a confidence question, sir. You have the task force that's tackling anti-Semitism.
30 seconds.
You've acknowledged that you're against BDS. You've acknowledged that you're considering IRA. You've had one of three co-chairs of the task force that rejects what you just said. How do the Jewish students feel comfortable then? And also let me ask you, because I only have a second left, what have you done about Concordia SPHR, a group on campus on October 11th held Israel responsible for the events of October the 7th and was a co-signer to a statement on social media where it gave full-throated support to Palestinian terrorism, writing, we emphasize that a population living under siege and occupation has no option but to resist. McGill removed McGill's name on this organization. What has Concordia done?
and I have no choice but to uphold that because we're getting close. If I'm allowed to continue with Mr. Fortin, 6 minutes, but 6 minutes, c'est tout, Monsieur Fortin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our 4 guests. What's happening on university campuses is extremely worrying, and I think you're all going through similar situations from coast to coast and in Quebec also. We've already heard you speak about the issue here, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you can allow freedom of expression without having things get out of hand and go overboard. I have always felt that universities are a wonderful place for having the most difficult discussions between students and with faculty, and I'm always a little troubled when there's talk of limiting freedom of expression, specifically in universities. However, hate speech is unacceptable, and so there is a proposal in C-63 for defining what constitutes hate speech. There's also the religious exception in the criminal code that allows hate speech if it is based on a religious text. I'm talking about hate speech or anti-Semitic speech. So that's all part of the picture. Maybe I will start with the order on the agenda. Mr. Carr, President Carr, how do you propose to combat hate speech without limiting freedom of expression? Thank you for the question. I won't talk about the encampment specifically, but maybe I can answer your question with some figures. What happened on our campus on November 8th that I already referred to, 70 events, academic events led by students who were either pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel. I think this shows all of the effort that our entire community made to ensure that there is still the possibility of discussing issues in a respectful and civil way. At the same time, we canceled or rejected 5 university events because we determined that they posed a risk for security of our community and for the delivery of our academic mission. Sorry for being impolite, Mr. President Carr, but can you tell us what those 5 events were that you decided to reject or cancel? There were 4 pro-Palestinian events and 1 pro-Israel event. And these were external guests who had been invited to the university to give speeches. Thank you. In your opinion, people who are not clients of the university, students or faculty, should they be allowed to protest on university campuses, or should it only be people who have a reason to be there, students or faculty? Well, as I said at the beginning, Concordia is really in central Montreal. There's a metro station that opens up into 3 of our buildings, and in the past our university has always been open to the public. So now we're in a situation where we want to always make sure that public institutions such as ours are open for citizens of Quebec and Canada. But at the same time, we've seen, especially after October 8th, there's a pressure from people who are not affiliated with the university. And should those people not be allowed to access university campuses? It's very difficult to answer that. We are a university. We're not security guards. At Concordia, for example, there are 30,000 people on campus every single day. I have 12 security agents who work on prevention on our downtown campus. In normal times, that's fine. As my colleague said, the vast majority of our staff, faculty, and students are respectful. So there's also this issue of means, how universities can react to this, and also to maintain freedom of expression, academic freedom, which are enshrined in law in Quebec. It's not an easy balance to strike. You're absolutely right. I don't know how long I have left. That's all. Your time is up. Thank you very much, Mr. Fortin.
Pending the vote, we still have minutes left, so we will come back. So suspended. Meeting called back to order. This is what I propose to do. It's 1:26 p.m. We will complete the first round with Mr. Garrison of 6 minutes. I will go to the second round of 5, 5, 2.5, 2.5, and conclude for the afternoon. So thank you very much for bearing with us, and we will continue with 6 minutes for Mr. Garrison where we left off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to be a bit breathless. It's not that far to the chamber. I thank the witnesses for being here today, but I have to say that I find it a bit distressing that your testimony doesn't seem to match the reality that I hear from students on campus. And not just at your institutions, but from institutions in my own riding and across the country. And one of the problems that I see is that while it's great to say anti-Semitism is unacceptable and great to say Jews should be included in diversity, I don't actually see that in the policies that I've been able to access. So I'm going to start with Professor Girdler from U of T. Where in your anti-harassment policies or anywhere else in your policies does it say that anti-Semitism, explicitly say anti-Semitism is not acceptable on campus?
Madam Chair, I want to thank the member for his question. So I can answer in a couple of ways. First of all, our Code of Student Conduct does indeed note that vexatious conduct that is directed at one or more specific individuals is potentially evidence of discriminatory conduct or harassment. And it names race, ancestry, ethnic origin, color, religion, these kinds of traits, which are indeed straight out of the Ontario Human Rights Code. So it takes that approach rather than naming individual faiths, religions, or cultures. So it's meant to be all-inclusive. But another way of answering the member's question would be to note that directly as a result of the work of our anti-Semitism working group, we have reviewed and overhauled our EDI process to make sure that our equity policies explicitly recognize anti-Semitism as a form of discrimination, harassment, or hate. And we have trained all of our equity officers expressly to address these issues. I could say more, but I think that is indeed directly answering the member's question.
Thank you for that answer. I guess as a gay man of a certain age who used to be told that there was no need to list LGBT community and things because discrimination was illegal, I found things improved once there was an explicit reference. And so I guess what I would encourage the U of T to do is to make more explicit statements rather than to simply say all forms of discrimination are prohibited, because the one where we have an epidemic of discrimination going on right now is anti-Semitism, given the connection.
We have indeed made such statements and will continue to do so if and as necessary.
And in terms of equity programs on campus, are Jews explicitly included as groups within diversity and equity?
Yes.
So there's specific reference, not just a general reference?
Yes. No, it's specific. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And now to Professor Saini from McGill. Same kind of questions. Where, if at all, in McGill's policies does it specifically say that anti-Semitism is not acceptable as a form of harassment or discrimination on campus?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll answer through you the member's question. We apply our student code with respect to discrimination, hate, bullying, harassment, or any other offensive behavior that is targeted at specific groups based on their race, religion, background, circumstance, et cetera, et cetera. So it's much like how my colleague at University of Toronto described. Our policies fully cover all forms of hate against all communities. Lately, as the anti-Semitism has become much more obvious and explicit in our society, including on our campuses, we have been calling it out specifically. And we will certainly look at going forward whether any changes are needed, where we need to explicitly enshrine any particular groups within our EDI policies or discrimination policies.
And in terms of policies on equity, diversity, and inclusion, are Jews specifically included in those policies as they exist right now?
Okay, I believe they are, but I will have to verify it one more time to make sure that that my personal understanding of it is correct, and I can get back to the committee.
And the focus has always been on students here, but we know that many faculty have been engaged in the encampments and in other anti-Semitic activities on campus. And so just because I have you right now, Professor Saini, are there policies which would apply to faculty which are explicit in banning anti-Semitism or not?
Madam Chair, answering through you, the answer is yes, that if any faculty are found to be violating any of our policies with regard to hate and discrimination and including anti-Semitism, that our policies are adequate to account for that, and the proceedings will be taken against those individuals.
Thank you. And I'll turn to those in the room. Dr. Bacon, my alma mater at UBC. The same kind of question. Are things actually made explicit when it comes to anti-Semitism in harassment and discrimination policies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Indeed, our discrimination policy outlines the mechanisms to address any discrimination that is protected under the Human Rights Code, very much including race, religion, and place of origin. And the policy is interpreted in a manner consistent with how BC's courts and the Human Rights Tribunal interpret.
I'm sorry, time's up for this one. And now I will go to the second round, deuxième tour. 5 minutes, please, to MP Landsman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to continue with Mr. President Carr. Are you aware of the demand letter sent by Neil Oberman to the university, speaking about hatred on campus?
Yes, I am.
So we've established that you're aware that anti-Semitism is a problem on Concordia's campus, and that there has been incidents of violence. You called them a black eye for Concordia. I would call it absolutely abhorrent and unacceptable, and an abdication of responsibility to keep Jewish students safe. But I think that's just a disagreement. You're aware that there are groups on campus that promote hatred against Jews?
Which groups are you referring to?
Well, I can name one, SPHR.
SPHR is a group on campus. It's important to understand that under the Quebec law, student associations act independently of the university.
So there's no responsibility from the university president if any of those groups are causing chaos on campus, which you referred to in your opening statements as a blemish on Concordia. There's no responsibility for a university president or the administration on any of that?
I did not say that, and in fact, what I said in my opening statement is that we've worked very hard to keep channels of communication open with all student groups, including with SPHR. Our goal has been to work to prevent episodes from happening on campus and work to the extent possible to de-escalate episodes.
Let me ask you about the November 8th incident that you talked about in your opening statement. There's a student there. He's in his 8th year of his undergrad. Has that student been expelled or suspended based on, frankly, being arrested twice since October 7th?
I'm not going to comment on the case of any individual student, and I'm not going to comment on any cases that are currently under investigation as per our processes.
So have there been
code.
any students that have been expelled or suspended? The reason I am asking is because I think there's a lot of people watching who, frankly, are looking at this testimony, which is the exact opposite of what students and faculty have told this committee about their experience, and are watching university presidents abdicate their responsibility for keeping Jewish students safe on campus.
So this is the Justice Committee. The Justice Committee also, I think, understands the importance of institutions abiding by their practices. That is what we are doing in our application of our Code of Conduct on behavioral cases and processes which have been launched following complaints that are evidence found.
I'm very happy that you explained to me what the Justice Committee is, but I have asked you a question, and the question is, has anybody been suspended or expelled for their conduct on your university campuses, which has put Jewish students and students that are part of Jewish student groups and allies of those groups in danger? Just a yes or no.
At this point, no one has been suspended because processes are ongoing.
So we hear from presidents. We've now heard from U of T. We've now heard from Concordia that processes are ongoing, but nobody has had any consequences for any of these actions. This has been going on for 7 months on campus. We've had students here tell us stories about not feeling safe on going to school, on going to libraries, on going to classes. There are faculty members on university campuses across this country who have not been let in on various parts of their campuses. And yet nobody, not a single person, has been expelled or suspended for any of the conduct.
Back to the events of the 8th of November, 3 individuals were banned from our campus as a result of that activity.
But the students of your university who have participated in this, again, not suspended. The same case at U of T. Just I find that the testimony here today that says that we're working on it and everything is going to be fine is frankly divorced from reality. And it's the reality of students actually sitting behind you in this room who have come to this committee and testified about being afraid of going onto your campuses. So I'll ask you one more time. The parents that are watching, that are going to decide whether their children will attend places like Concordia, places like U of T, what do you say to them about whether their kids will feel safe on campus if there is no deterrence and there's no consequences for those who have acted in contravention of that?
Well, I would go back to something I said earlier, which is that despite the events of the 8th of November, we at Concordia have had 70 events on campus with respect to the Middle East, the majority of which were organized by students.
Thank you very much, President Kerr. Appreciate that. We will now go to MP de Brussen for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to begin a bit where I had my conversation with Universities Canada, which is that anti-Semitism at universities isn't a new thing. In fact, there's a long history. And I appreciate that President Gertler made specific reference to the quota system that had applied to Jewish prospective students. I'm wondering if we can go around to each of the presidents to let me know if your university did have a formal or informal quota system for Jewish students, starting with McGill.
Madam Chair, responding through you, yes, I am aware that McGill had a quota system until, I believe, 1960s. And it is a part of our history that we are absolutely not proud of. And it is a part of Canadian history that I think as Canadians, we should all be very concerned about. But looking forward, we have been working since the 1960s to make McGill a much more inclusive place, and that is a work in progress, and we continue to do that.
I apologize, President Saini. I just wanted to jump in because the question that I had was about the quotas for Concordia.
Yes, so one of Concordia's founding institutions, Sir George Williams University, was one of the first universities in Quebec to admit Jewish students without any quota. That was going on in the 1950s and 1960s when quotas existed elsewhere. We are also a university which has an academic program in Canadian Jewish Studies, which is one of the oldest in the country. And today we also are, I think, one of the very few universities in the country which is an institute for Israeli studies.
Just to be clear, though, am I misunderstanding things to believe that Concordia also had an informal quota or a formal quota for Jewish?
No, there was no quota.
No quota at Concordia. All right. And UBC?
Thank you for the question. I'm still new to UBC, but when it was raised in the previous session, I endeavored to find out the answer, and my understanding is there was no such thing at UBC. But I will do a more profound research, and I will get back to you if that's not the case.
Thank you. When we've been talking a lot about the policies of equity and does it include anti-Semitism for the universities here who have acknowledged that they had quota systems, is that included in part of the learning for staff, students, and other people who are participating in the DEI? I'll start with McGill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Answering through you, yes, it is part of our EDI policies to ensure that all disadvantaged groups who have faced disadvantage or exclusion in the past
I'm just talking about Jewish students and anti-Semitism right now. I'm just asking about the quotas for Jewish students.
Yes, well, I've answered the question regarding quota already. With regard going forward, now our EDI policies
I'm sorry, it's
are
just
totally
really
inclusive.
short on time, President Saini. I just wanted to know if there's a specific reference in the DEI content about the quotas on Jewish students. That's what I'm asking.
I cannot answer that if there is actually a specific reference to the past quotas, but I can answer that there is no such provision at this point that there is actually a quota for any given community.
Okay, and President Gertler, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mentioned that The incident from the history was in the Temerity Faculty of Medicine, and their training now includes a module exactly on this very issue.
Thanks. And going to that, can I ask you to please table with the committee Dr. Cooper's study about anti-Semitism in the medical school prior to the most recent October 7th events? I have less than a minute, but I'm passing it over to Mr. Mendicino.
Thanks very much. I want to highlight a concern around foreign funding and foreign influence, and indeed foreign interference in the post-secondary sector. A number of groups have written me and my colleagues to express their concerns around this, and I'm wondering if I can get a commitment from all of the universities who are represented in today's hearing to raise the bar when it comes to transparency around private funding of your institutions, to ensure that that funding is in alignment with Canadian values, including the values that have been espoused today, academic freedom, and certainly not hate and anti-Semitism. I'll start with those on the line. Yes or no?
So time is up, but I think you've heard Mr. Mendicino's question, and
My answer is yes.
okay. Stop reset.
Mine is as well.
MP Fortin, la parole est à vous pour 2 minutes.
You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Dr. Saini McGill. Obviously, we're talking about anti-Semitism. That's the theme of our study at our committee, but there are other forms of hate. I'd like to know if at McGill there's also racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, other forms of hate that exist right now on McGill campuses. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, in 2022, we implemented an Islamophobia and anti-Semitism initiative, which included wide consultations with our communities, specifically with the Muslim and Jewish communities, and based on that, we developed several recommendations that have already been implemented. So, of course, since if we undertook this study, it's because we recognize that there is also Islamophobia in our community, as well as anti-Semitism. Thank you. Forgive me for interrupting. I only have about a minute left. In your opinion, do you think all forms of hate should be treated the same way, or should we react differently depending on the type of hate we're talking about? Well, we look at each type of hate on a case-by-case basis, but of course, all types of hate and harassment are included in our policies. Thank you. Professor Carr from Concordia, the same question. Are there other forms of hate, and should we treat all of these forms of hate the same way? Unfortunately, the forms of hate that exist in wider society are also present on our campus. As I said earlier, we have a working group that has been studying different forms of hate, and I'm waiting for their recommendations on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia to better understand their recommendations for the future. Thank you.
2.5 minutes to Mr. Garrison, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to address one other thing that's been bothering me in this session, and that is this emphasis on due process. And so my question I'm going to direct to Dr. Carr to start with. When you say that there are processes underway, I have a certain amount of sympathy with that. But do your processes not require that those who are accused of anti-Semitic or harassment or other offenses cease the behavior while those processes are taking place? So in other words, if we were talking in a public context, if someone continued the behavior, that wouldn't be acceptable. They may not be found guilty of an offense yet, but they have to cease the behavior while the process is going on. Is there no way in any of your processes to require ceasing the anti-Semitic, hateful, and harassment behavior?
So that is part of our code, indeed. That individuals who are for whom we have evidence-based complaints, the processes are launched. And clearly, if the behavior continues or manifested in some further way, then an actionable response needs to happen.
An actionable response, what does that actually mean in the real world?
Well, as I said, we are very committed to upholding our process, and if someone is continually behaving in a way that is not acceptable according to our codes, we apply our codes.
And I would ask the same question, I know we're going to run out of time here, to Professor Gertler at the U of T. Do the processes not require people to cease abusive, harassing behavior while those processes take place?
They absolutely do.
And so how are these behaviors continuing if you say at the same time the processes are underway?
Well, I can't comment on individual cases, but I can tell you that where individuals have demonstrated repeated behavior that we believe to be in violation of our code, we follow up directly with them, and we have done so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my questions.
Thank you very much to the witnesses. Thank you for coming. Members, thank you for all bearing with us through our processes here. To the witnesses, if there's anything that you believe you needed to bring out that you didn't have the time to do so, please send us something in. Witnesses, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in the house next door in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting for today.